Welcome to the Queer Spirit Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Venegoni. Here we have conversations with artists, healers, and activists who enliven the LGBTQ communities and who empower our queer spirits to flourish. Today, my guest is Tony Eason. Tony has been teaching yoga for more than 15 years and has been a student himself for well over 20. He teaches his students to pay attention to the alignment of their bodies, to become aware of their breath, and to control the mind. Tony tells us how yoga saved his life as he went from struggling with addiction to becoming a teacher. We also talk about the importance of focusing the mind and not letting our fear stop us from reaching our goals. Tony also shares how he uses his classes to help foster community and diversity. Find more at whynottony.com. That's YNOTTONY.com. Hi, Tony. Thanks for being here. I'm excited to have you on the show and to talk to you today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, too. I'm excited to see what's going to happen.
Great. So I wanted to start out by asking you a little bit more about one of the things that I know you talk a lot about in your yoga class, which is the little man. And having been a student in one of your classes for many years, it's one of the concepts that you talk a lot about that has really stood out to me and something I share with a lot of people. And I wonder if you can share your idea of the little man with our listeners and how you came up with that idea.
I would say that the little man is that voice that's in your head. It's the voice that tells you you're not going to get the job. The person on the date, when you go on a date, the person you're with doesn't want to be with you. You're underqualified. You're too fat. You're too old. You can't possibly do that. It's a voice that usually, I believe, brings one down from possible goals.
And how do you apply that principle in your classes?
I tell people to challenge themselves. When you hear that voice as well, to exhale. The voice in your head cannot speak when you're exhaling. So when that voice starts to speak, blow air out of your mouth. And the more and more you practice in that way, you start to recognize that voice and you can shut it off quicker and continue with whatever your goal or destination is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that leads me to my next question, which you're already starting to answer a little bit, which is how does the practice of yoga help with life off the mat, out in the world, outside of the studio?
Okay, so I think the first mistake is that most people believe that yoga is what they do in the studio. To me, yoga is not what you do in the studio. In the studio is where you practice yoga so that when you go outside, then you can apply the practice, and that's where the yoga starts. The yoga starts when you have a distraction, when you are challenged or you have to go after something new. We're safe in the yoga studio, and we practice a physical yoga, but it's to take you to a mental place where you can practice better outside. Mm-hmm. I mean, not practice, live outside.
Yeah. That's actually one of the things I really enjoy about your classes is that you really emphasize that during the class, to remind us, okay, this is something we're practicing, exercising right now, but it's something to live outside of here.
Yeah, that's the goal, is to be able to practice yoga while walking, practice yoga while eating, while sleeping, while talking, while everything that you do, not just that hour and a half sitting there in the yoga studio. That's not yoga, that's a practice.
Mm-hmm. So if yoga is not a practice, then what is it? Is it a lifestyle?
Yes. I would say, it's definitely more a lifestyle. Mm-hmm. It's a way of thinking, a way of recognizing, or it's an awareness is what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Or it's a philosophy.
Not so much even I don't think of it as a philosophy. I think of it as an awareness. It's a tool that can be used by any religions or anybody. It's not, if it was a philosophy, it would be more, it could contradict things, but it doesn't. It can go with anyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tool. The Yoga Sutra states first control of the body, then the breath, and then the mind. And that's the way it happens. But one has to remember that the practice of yoga truly is to stop the sensations of the mind. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really matter if you can stand on one finger or levitate or, chant every chant under the sun. Mm-hmm. But can you stop the sensations of your mind?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That is the true practice of yoga. So that can be done everywhere.
Yeah.
By anyone and during anything that you're doing. Like
yeah.
right
now. Yeah. I actually remember, I think it was I think the very first class I took with you was the very first time I ever attempted to do a headstand. Yes. And I hated it. And I think my little man was screaming off the hook, this is not safe. You're going to fall. You're going to hurt yourself. And you came over and helped me and told me to just exhale. And I can really see how taking that kind of practice out into the world is helpful too.
Yeah. Can I tell you a quick story?
Yes.
Okay. So recently, within the last month, I had a yoga student come in for the first time. And we were getting ready to practice headstands. So I always say, how many people do not practice headstand? And so I would take those people aside and give them the demo and let the other people do their thing. So he came aside, one of the 3 students that didn't practice headstand, and I asked him, why don't you practice headstand? And he said, because I'm too heavy, I'm too fat. And my response to that was, quit lying to yourself.
Uh-huh.
And I told him, so today I'm going to show you the chair variation of headstand. And when you're ready to practice the regular variation, you just let me know. So the next week, he comes in and everyone starts to practice headstand. And I say to him, shall I get the chairs? And he said, no, I'm ready to practice the real form of headstand. And 3 minutes later, he was doing it almost off the wall.
Wow.
Yes, but that's the little man. The voice told him he's too fat. Perhaps he's not the Lululemon long hair, blonde hair, blue-eyed woman.
Uh-huh.
But nor am I.
Yes, we are both far from that.
Right.
Nor do we have man buns.
Right, exactly. But so his little man was telling him he's too fat, he's too heavy. And to me, as his teacher, I had to let him know what he was saying to himself. So I told him, stop lying to yourself. There's something else. Maybe you think you're not strong enough. Then say that. But it's not that you're too heavy. Mm-hmm. Because you're not.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful. So now he does headstand.
Yeah.
And I think within 2 months, he'll be in the middle of the room. And it's fabulous.
Great. So speaking more about bringing yoga out of the studio, one of the other things I know that you do a lot, which is fairly unusual, is that you teach yoga class out in public. And I wonder if you can talk more about those experiences and why you do that.
Yeah, that goes along with what I was saying earlier about that the real yoga starts when you leave the studio. So I started doing the outdoor yogas as a way to challenge students with external forces, because they say a yogi is not moved by external forces. So I took the students out to Pier 39, to Golden Gate Park, to the mayor's office right on the front, and different places in Ocean Beach, and different places just to put them out there and have other challenges. Like when we were at Pier 39, people came up and started taking pictures. Can you stay in your headstand while somebody's putting a zoom lens up your nose? If you can, you're practicing yoga.
Uh-huh.
So that, yeah, it's really fun. I think it is a great challenge to see if you can do a headstand on a sidewalk with people walking by and not be moved.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's it.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that I really like about the thing that you emphasize in the class is not being moved by external forces like people or cars or the weather, and also not being moved by internal distraction like the little man. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Because remember, I said yoga, the purpose of yoga is to remove the sensations of the mind. That's it.
Yeah.
Because if you take those out, I always say, if you remove the sensations of the mind, then you learn to see roses where there are roses and thorns where there are thorns.
Mm-hmm.
And everything else in your life will become clearer.
Yeah, yeah. And how did you get first started with yoga?
I started yoga. Okay, the place where I first took my yoga class was 24 Hour Fitness, 16th and Potrero, about 27 years ago. But I went there because a friend told me that if I went to the yoga class, then she would take me out for lunch and buy me a drink. So I said, okay, whether I like it or not, you'll take me out to lunch and buy me a drink. And she said, yes. And so I went to the class and I liked it so much that I took her out to lunch and bought her a drink. And then I studied with that same teacher. Her name is Mary Friedland. She was my first yoga teacher, and I took classes with her at 24 Hour Fitness for 5 years, 4 days a week.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a great, empowering moment. I learned about devotion, and I started reading yoga books. My first yoga book was Paramahansa Yogananda, a life, I think it's called Autobiography of a Yogi. Beautiful book. But yeah, so that's how it started.
And what made you decide to become a teacher?
My teacher told me that it was time to become a teacher. I studied with Mary Friedland, and then Mary Friedland sent me to study with Janet McLeod at the Iyengar Institute. And Janet McLeod, when I was taking classes with her, said to me one day, you should enroll in the teacher training program so you can become my apprentice and put the mats out for all of my classes. And I laughed. And 6 months later, I was Janice's apprentice in the Iyengar Yoga Institute and putting the mats out for all of her classes at 8 a.m. on Wednesdays. I was like, oh my God. Yeah. So then Janet was the one that told me to become the teacher. And so then I've been a teacher now for over 17 years and a student for at least 27.
Mm-hmm.
It was a wonderful choice. It was hard. Becoming a yoga teacher is not for the meek. Mm-hmm. Because the first 5 years you're going to starve. If you can't do that, then forget it. It's not about being able to do a full Hanumanasana, the splits, or have the perfect yogic form. That's not the yogi. That's the ego. Mm-hmm. But if you to become a yoga teacher, you have to want it. You have to want it real bad because you will give up everything.
What do you think the Tony of 25 years ago would say about the Tony now?
Tony of 25 years ago wouldn't recognize the Tony of now. Yeah, no, wouldn't possibly recognize. I'm completely a different person, but I've also learned that every day you're a different person. I think one of the fallacies in life is to try to hold on to what you were. Do you know what I mean? Or remember what you were. Don't even think about what you were 5 years ago. Think more so about what one wants to be 5 years from now. Mm-hmm. I think would be a better way to use one's energy. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't really think about 25 years. So
yeah.
Think about 25 years from now. You know, what do I want to do in a week? What do I want to do in a month? Not what I was before. You know, sometimes I'll look back and I learn from it, but I don't try to hold on to it or recapture it. Recapturing the past is only going to set you up for failure.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the past, I know you've also talked about many years ago you struggled with addiction, and I wonder if there are ways that yoga helped you overcome that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because with addictions, there's obstacles. In the Yoga Sutras, if you read the Yoga Sutras, it will tell you all of the obstacles you will have in life and how to get over those obstacles. Because like I said, yoga is a tool. So you can use that tool for everything else in your life. So you're having an addiction of whatever. The Yoga Sutras will tell you exactly which obstacles are going to occur in life and how to fix them. Do you know? And if you're willing to accept the reality, then you can solve the problem. But if you're not going to accept the reality, if you're not going to allow yourself to know, I have an addiction, if you can't say that, then you can't solve the problem. But if you admit that you have an addiction, then you can definitely figure out mentally how to make that change.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we started recording, you said that you did the AIDS life cycle for many, many years, and you decided to stop doing it because it wasn't challenging anymore. And I wonder if yoga still feels challenging to you.
Yes, yeah. There's a big difference between the two. The AIDS life cycle is a 575-mile bike ride, 7 days, San Francisco to Los Angeles. And I've done that now 20 times. The same course, the same exact thing, 15 times on the same bike. Not a challenge. The yoga practice, or the Hatha yoga practice, is over 426 poses that most individuals, I would say 98% of the population, will never ever complete. So I haven't completed one journey yet in the yoga. It's not the same. It's, the AIDS life cycle is not a challenge. And I tell people that one must continue to challenge oneself. So I'm doing other things now, and that's fine.
And what are you doing now to challenge yourself?
My next major endeavor is on November 12th, 2018. I will be in Marathon, Greece, running the Marathon to Athens Marathon, the original marathon of 26.2 miles. So that most greatest. And then the new standard is I've become a swimmer. And I've been swimming every other day for the last 7.5 months. And I will tell you, swimming is hella harder than running or riding a bike.
Really? Huh.
Way harder. The first time I was in the pool, I lasted 4.5 minutes. But swimming, but the big thing is right now is the marathon, and I look very, very, very forward to that. It's a killer, running a marathon. They say that 1% of 1% of the United States population has ever completed a marathon. And I tell people, if I were president of the United States, anyone that went to jail for a major felony or something like that would have to run a marathon.
Why is that?
An official marathon, because by the time you finish the 26.2 miles, every demon in your life has surfaced. But you have clarity when you get to the finish line, because everything will come up, because you're at least, the average person is probably 4 hour, 4.5 hour marathon. You have 4 hours that you are by yourself. Most people can't handle that. And if you're running and using physical effort at the same time, it really breaks you down mentally.
So the little man really bites your head off with that one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when I did the San Francisco Marathon, my first one, the little man was running off. Mile 12, somebody had a keg of beer. And I almost stopped and had a beer. And I was like, wait a minute, that's the little man.
Uh-huh.
And then mile 20, the marathon goes right by my house. And the little man said, go upstairs and have a quick shower. You can come back out all fresh and finish the last couple miles. And then I was like, no, that's the little man.
Uh-huh.
Setting me up for failure.
What do you think would happen if you stopped challenging yourself?
I think I would die. Yes, I am almost certain I would probably die, because there would be no excitement. And if there's no excitement in your life, if you're not going for something, some goal, some endeavor, or some devotion, if you don't have that in your life, then you're dead. And I believe for me, if I mentally allowed myself just to fucking then that would physically come into my body as well, because I'm a very sensitive guy.
Mm-hmm.
So if I became mentally depressed for a long period of time, that would come into my body. I believe it. So I always keep myself challenged.
So I want to ask you one last question about your classes and your teaching, and that's about and I don't know if you consciously do this, but the way I've experienced it in your classes, that you really foster community and diversity.
Yeah.
And the way that you get students to engage with each other and talk to each other. And I remember one of the first times I walked into your yoga class, I had taken other yoga classes, but that was the first time I walked into a yoga class where everyone was sitting around talking to each other. They weren't just sitting there quietly waiting for the teacher to start or meditating or anything like that. And I wonder if you could say more about how and why you do that.
Well, I would say that, let me get this right, the three jewels of Buddhism, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the community, is one of the three jewels of Buddhism. Mm-hmm. So I call myself a Buddhist, whatever that is. But the three jewels of Buddhism being those three, and the community and all of that, that's what started me pushing community. Plus, as a marketing ploy, as a yoga teacher, if you get the people to talk to each other, they're more apt to show up. You can't keep them entertained 24 hours a day. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. People will come more to the yoga class because they don't want that the other person doesn't see them there, or they miss the conversation. They didn't get the 5-minute gossip before the yoga teacher showed up, or the 10-minute gossip after the yoga teacher left. The students want to talk to each other, and I promote them having, like potlucks or whatever, with no real agenda, mm-hmm. but just to hang out. I think it's really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you also have to remember, I always say, birds of a feather flock together. So you must always look around and see what type of birds are you hanging out with? Or is that where you want to go? Do you know, these people going to bring you up or bring you down?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to create communities which are positive
Mm-hmm.
and inclusive for everyone. As far as you were talking about diversity, I promote diversity in yoga because, like, when I went to the Iyengar Institute, there were 37 students in the teacher training program. How many Black people were there? One. Me.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only African American in the study or the program, the 2-year program. And so after that moment, I was like, no, we need to get everybody mixed up here. Because I felt alone. It's a very subconscious feeling. You don't feel it on the surface, but you will notice it. Do you know what I mean? And then you start to wonder why. Mm-hmm. Why are you the only one there? Then people start treating you differently because you are the only one. Yeah, so I totally push diversity, and I'm against, I don't know what the opposite of diversity is. What is it?
Monotony.
Okay, I'm against monotony. I'm against
monotony, monoculture, homogenous.
Yes. I'm against groups. I'm against cliques.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Why can't we just hang out? Because I always tell people you don't have to be like the person next to you, because number one, you can't. Mm-hmm. And also, you don't. No, I'm going to leave that alone. Never mind.
And I think that another thing that you do to support that idea of diversity is that you try your best to make yoga accessible for people who may not be able to access it due to finances, because in the past you've offered donation, right. And then you offer your free yoga classes. And I wonder if you want to share more about that. And you have one coming up in August.
Yes. Okay, so first of all, there is free donation coming up in August, my annual Ocean Beach outdoor free yoga class. Last year, we had 150 to 200 people. It was amazing. Wow. And now I have assistants. So I had 3 other yoga teachers come out and help. It was pretty cool.
And for our listeners, this is in San Francisco, just for people to know, because this goes everywhere.
Right. San Francisco Ocean in August. Just type it in Google. You'll find it. Back to free and donation. I read years ago, as I began to become a yoga teacher, somewhere in some scripture, that a yoga teacher cannot deny a yoga class to a yoga student based on finance. You must give them another opportunity to pay. So even to this very day, even though I probably shouldn't say this, to this very day, you can still come to my class. We'll figure it out. If you don't have any money, well, you might have to get a job at the gym, or you might have to sweep the studio, or something. But there's something everyone can do, and I don't believe that yoga teachers should deny students rights to classes. If they can contribute in some way and they show devotion, then let them in the room. Yeah, so everyone should be able to go to yoga classes, regardless of price. To me, it's like yoga is like a church, the yoga class. You can't say no, but you can tell them what they can do in exchange for the class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Go on.
So my final question for you is, I wonder if you can share with us a person, practice, or experience that you've had that has supported your queer spirit to flourish in your life?
Okay. I guess I was going to say Maya Angelou, but we're going to retract the Maya Angelou, and we're going to say, because you said queer life. So in my queer life, I would say being an African-American queer male, the most influential person of my youth, where in the beginning of my coming out and all of that, where it was most important, would be, and this is probably going to sound really weird. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Barbra Streisand. I would say Barbra Streisand because when I used to listen to songs like, I'm the greatest star, I am by far, but no one knows it.
Mm.
When she said she was a bagel on a plate full of onion rolls, I understood that. And then she had this song, Yentl. It all began the day I found that from my window, I could only see a piece of sky. I could go on, but I won't tell you the whole thing. But I would say that those songs in the Barbra Streisand of that era was very empowering for me as coming out, with my coming out, because those type of songs empowered me. I'm the greatest star, I am by far, and no one knows it. Even though I was being, ostracized and bullied and called nigger and called Oreo and, all these different things. Why are you trying to be white? No, I'm not trying to be white. I'm trying to get an education.
Mm-hmm.
But all of those things were going on in my life, in my childhood. And then my escape, I would listen to Barbra Streisand. So I will give total props to Barbra Streisand.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I never would have pegged you as a Barbra fan. Now I know.
Well, yes, my best friend and I collected every Barbra Streisand album. He has the collection in his house, every one of them.
Well, Tony, this has been really great chatting with you. Thank you for being here with me today and sharing your story.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's pretty cool. I have to give you props. I remember when you first started your practice, your private practice, therapist and all. I have watched you flourish, and it has been amazing. You took it, and you've created great things for yourself, and you should be applauded.
Well, thank you.
I'm proud of you, Nick.
Thank you. To find the resources we discussed today, find the show notes at thequeerspirit.com. And if you enjoyed the show, remember to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. This will help us reach and support more queer people all over. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.